This episode of Eat the Rules is brought to you by You on Fire. You on Fire is the online group coaching program that I run that gives you a step-by-step way of building up your self-worth beyond your appearance. With personalized coaching from me, incredible community support, and lifetime access to the program so that you can get free from body shame and live life on your own terms. Get details on what's included and sign up for the next cycle at summerinnanen.com/you on fire. I'd love to have you in that group. This is Eat the Rules, a podcast about body image, self-worth, anti-dieting, and intersectional feminism. I am your host, Summer Innanen, a professionally trained coach specializing in body image, self-worth, and confidence, and the best-selling author of Body Image Remix. If you're ready to break free of societal standards and stop living behind the number on your scale, then you have come to the right place. Welcome to the show. This is episode 225, and we are talking about toxic food and food addiction. This is a rebroadcast of one of the Death to Diets episodes that I did with my friend Vinny Welsby from Fierce Fatty. In this particular episode, we're looking at the Jonathan Van Ness show called Getting Curious, where they answered the question, why do I love snacks so much? And this episode turned into a really horrible episode about debunked science from 1996 and fatphobia and food shaming. And so we are going to dissect that. And we are also going to look at processed food and whether it's toxic and sugar addiction and all that other fun stuff that makes us fear food and have a disordered relationship with it. You can find all the links and resources mentioned at summerinnanen.com/225. I want to give a shout out to Hates Being Called Jenny. Sorry, it took me a minute to figure out what that said. For this amazing review. It is hard to be body positive in today's world of impossible beauty standards. I love listening to this podcast because it gives me hope that our world has voices in it that are working to give women an option besides dieting. The path to a wonderful relationship to your body seems clearer after listening to Summer for a while. Thank you so much for this wonderful podcast. Thank you so much, Hates Being Called Jenny. I really appreciate that review. You can leave a review for this show by going to iTunes, search for Eat the Rules, then click ratings and reviews and click to leave a review. I do read them. They mean a lot to me and they help other people to find the show more importantly. You can also help the show out by subscribing via iTunes or whatever podcast platform you use. And I also just want to say that a couple episodes ago, I mentioned that you couldn't get more than the last 100 episodes of the podcast. Turns out that was just a setting in my podcast hosting platform, Libsyn. So that's been changed. And what that means is that now you can access all 225 episodes of the podcast via whatever platform you use to listen to the podcast. I will say that I started this podcast in 2014, which was 8 years ago now. It's a long time ago. And I've learned a lot. I've grown a lot. And I would probably cringe listening to some of the older episodes. I know there's some great guest interviews on there. That being said, if you hear something that doesn't sit right, please just let me know. I'll take an episode down. I'm sure I said stuff that I would not necessarily agree with now, but I know that there's a lot of really great interviews there. Some of you have said, how come I can only get the last 100? Well, now you can get them all and enjoy. I could come up with a list of some of my favorites, but it would take me a few minutes to go back and look at all of them. But there's some really, really good ones in there. And don't forget to go to summerinnanen.com/freebies to get your free 10-day body confidence makeover with 10 steps to take right now to feel better in your body. This was the 4th episode that we did of the Death to Diets series. This is a great one. We loved blowing up all the BS around toxic food and food addiction. So I think you're really going to love it. Enjoy the show.
Welcome to the show today, which we're talking about toxic food. And the show is Death to Diets. What is Death to Diets, Summer Innanen?
It is a series that we are doing together where we explore
diet culture nonsense, and we are not here to shame people who diet. Rather, we are here to look at the culture of dieting and the problematic elements of that and its intersection with body image and lots of other things. And do you want to do a personal intro first?
Yeah, so my name is Vinny Welsby, they, them. I am a fat, non-binary, incredible human that teaches about fat phobia, weight bias, healthism, and I'm friends with Summer. Yeah, that's me. What about you, Summer?
I'm Summer Inanen, she, her. I am a professionally trained life coach. I specialize in helping people with body image, self-worth, and confidence. And I am friends with Vinny.
Thank you. Today, we're going to talk about quote-unquote toxic food. And there's going to be a big trigger warning for this episode because we're actually going to be talking about food, beliefs around food and beliefs around food addiction, sugar addiction, mentioning what someone eats in a day. We're going to be actually mentioning quantities and what they eat. And that's going to be in the first section. And then in your section, you're going to read.
Yeah, there's some sound bites from a particular article that was called Toxic Food. That may be, like just, if you're feeling sensitive or any, we're going to be dissecting it. But when we talk about some of the quotes that are in the article, that I would say that some of that stuff, we're just going to put a content warning ahead if you're sensitive to talk about, like the O word or stuff, that implies that the amount of food you eat is going to make your body larger and things like that. So, but we're going to be smashing it all apart. So hopefully you'll be fine, but just getting a content warning before that too.
Excellent. And the reason why we decided to do this episode is quite timely, is that I very excitedly started watching Netflix, as I do 27 hours a day of my life. I started watching JVN, Jonathan Van Ness's new show called Getting Curious with Jonathan Van Ness. JVN, they are from Queer Eye, which is another show. And you've not seen it, Summer. I can't believe it. There's like a big 5 seasons.
I watched Queer Eye like back in the 90s or when it first came out, but I haven't not in the last, not since that first iteration of it. So JVN, although I know who they are, if you were to show me a picture, I'd be like, okay, I recognize that face. Not familiar, don't follow, just, yeah.
So you're lucky you didn't have to experience this that I'm about to share today, which is
tell me about it.
Oh my goodness. So JVN is a non-binary queer hairdresser, fabulous human, excited with the new show. The new show first started talking about bugs was the first episode. The next episode was gender hair and then gender. And it was so kind of deconstructing all of these different ideas and racism and all this stuff. And then the next episode was titled, Why Do I Love Snacks So Much? And I thought this would be like an ode to a letter to snacks and why it's so wonderful. So I was like, oh, great. We're going to deconstruct the idea around snacks and why we love them and why they're great. And in the beginning of the episode, the first phrase that piqued my kind of red flag waving going off was the phrase processed foods. JVN said processed foods. And I was like, okay, well, keep watching. This is not sounding good so far. But then they went to a donut factory. And JVN was like, oh my God, this is amazing. Enjoying eating the donuts. It was cool and magical. Then they actually saw someone else. But then the big chunk of the program was JVN meeting a stony-faced, thin, white, quote, food addiction expert. And as soon as I saw this person on the screen with their title, and she was just so miserable as well. like, I'm here to judge you. I'll come on the screen. I was like, oh shit. And even that title, Hey Summer, food addiction expert. What would that make you?
Well, that maybe she's hungry.
Yeah.
That's why.
She's fucking hungry.
That maybe was why she came on kind of mean. I don't know. I haven't seen it, so I'm just throwing that out there.
I'm telling you, she is hungry as shit, is what she like. Oh my God. And so anyway, the first thing she says, Jonathan, share what you typically eat in a day. And so Jonathan pulls out from a bag all of the things that they eat in a day. And so skip ahead a couple of minutes here because I'm gonna share what JVN eats. So for breakfast, he has coffee, is what he said. And then at lunchtime, he has a small salad. And then at dinner time, he has this small vegan pizza. And then he has some candy, some sweet things. So he says, I have a Pop-Tart, a Gusher, I don't know what that is, and an Oreo. So that is what JVN says that they eat in a day. Now, Summer, if someone told you that that's what they eat in a typical day, what would your reaction be?
How are you feeling? Because that, to me, sounds like less food than my toddler eats. And I would be absolutely starving if I ate that. And I know that this person is a grown-ass adult. So my guess would be that they're probably starving.
Yes. And actually, I forgot to mention, JVN did share that he has a chocolate-covered pretzel, and he offered one to Stony-faced food addiction expert, and she looked like he had just offered her a steaming pile of shit. And she was like, no, I'm okay. I'm fine right now. Like put those disgusting yogurt-covered pretzels away, you beast. How dare you offer me a pretzel? I think, though, secretly she was probably like, oh, fucking hell. Oh, my God, a pretzel's so good. Yeah, so my reaction, too, was like, holy shit, JVN, you must be fucking starving. All of the work that you do, running around the world, being fabulous, working so hard, making these TV shows, and that's all you're eating. And then you're having like coffee for breakfast, which is, and then you're confused as to why that you might eat sweet things in the evening. To you and I, Summer, it seems really clear that Jonathan is not eating enough, and because of that, because he says he struggles with binge eating, is that he is eating more during the evening because he's not eating enough and he's restricted so much throughout the day. So to me, it seems really clear what needs to happen here.
It's super obvious. I feel like any nutrition expert, like even if they're kind of enmeshed in diet culture, like would still see that there's like an immense lack of caloric consumption happening for the majority of the day. And therefore, that's problematic in and of itself. So yeah, like I mean, even when in my dieting days, I would probably be like, that's not like, you're not eating. So, I mean, it's extremely obvious to me now, but I mean, like the fact that he's working with like, a professional and they're not identifying that, to me just seems so hugely problematic. And you think about all the people watching this show and then thinking, well, I must have a problem, or like I should be trying to eat coffee for breakfast only, or, all this other crap. Like I know enough about JVN to know that they're a pretty huge influencer, like have a pretty huge influence, right? Like massive following. A lot of people look up to them. And so to know that, other people are going to see this and potentially then pathologize themselves as being, binge eaters or addicted to food, when what is just happening is like a normal reaction to restriction, like a normal reaction. Yeah.
Yes. And so
what happens?
What happens is what she says is very kind of trying not to judge him too much for eating all of this quote unquote bad food. She says, so I think we can talk about some of the problems coming from this type of diet. And I'm thinking, okay, come on, like, this is your last chance. This is your last chance. This is your chance to say, you're not eating enough. Like, this totally makes sense why you think you might be, addicted to sugar or whatever. And she goes on to say, because my concern is that eating a diet like this is going to catch up to you. I hate that whole fucking, it's going to catch up to you. Like there's, like this disease is coming to get you if you eat an Oreo, like it's going to stalk you down. You might not feel it right now, but in the future, you better watch out, because if you eat an Oreo now, you're going to die, basically. So anyway, she says, it's going to catch up to you. I'm worried about what you might look like on the inside after eating like this. Ugh. I just fucking inside.
Well, I think because like JVN's really thin, right? Like, aren't they really skinny? Like,
no, they're not very. They're just straight size. They're just straight size.
Okay. But nonetheless, if they were fat, what do you think this person's response would have been, instead of just like, there's something wrong on the inside, right?
Yeah, inside and outside, because you're fat, clearly. It's
Yeah.
So continuing, she said, what you just showed me is sending you down the path of having some serious health problems later on. A lot of this food is bringing you down. It's tough. A lot of people in this country are in an abusive relationship with sugar. We're finding this O-word crisis in our country, where more than half of the country is struggling with being O-word or O-word. And a lot of that is tied back to the things that we are seeing here. Sugar-rich and processed food. You've developed a dependency on these foods.
What? Like, what? Oh my God, it's so wrong. It's comical.
Everything. Like, even a little thing, like half of people are struggling with being fat. Bitch, I ain't struggling with being fat. I'm fucking out here being fat and fabulous. Ain't no struggle here with me being fat. Just like even basic things like that, and saying you have developed a dependency on these foods.
No, you're hungry. Like, and these foods provide quick energy, and so you naturally gravitate towards them when you're hungry. Like, that's basic physiology.
And so Jonathan said, no, those words. I had to go to rehab before for those words. These feel like such big words. And so even JVN is like, oh shit, this sounds serious. And then this woman is like, it is serious. And then compared him eating food and sugar to drugs and alcohol. And then JVN confessed very shamefully that he thinks that he is a sugar addict. And my heart was just breaking. And by the way, when I first watched this episode, I got to the bit where she started saying the O words, and I turned that shit off, and I got straight on Instagram being like, what the fuck? Who is this? Oh my God. And so for the audience, I went back and watched it again and watched the whole thing and wrote down exactly what this motherfucking stupid food addict expert wrote down. So you're welcome. I'm traumatizing myself by looking at that shit.
Thank you for your service.
I know. The nutritionist then said that the sugar industry is tricking JVN because sugar masks the bitter taste from chemical additives and dyes and other things that are in processed food. And then JVN did this kind of side segment on chemicals, how chemicals have long names, and some chemicals are used in other processes outside of food and are also used in making food. And so if a chemical is used in one process, therefore it can't be used in food making because that means it's toxic. And science tells us if you can't spell or pronounce a word, it means that it's toxic. Isn't that true, Summer? Is that facts?
You know, I don't even think that they taught us that in nutrition school.
Really? Is that bullshit? You didn't learn it in nutrition school?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm trying to remember, but I feel like that's probably more of a literacy issue than like a a food issue.
It's just it's one of the things like, oh, this food, it's got so many names that I can't pronounce, therefore it's bad for you. Well, no. And saying it has chemicals. Well, yes, because every fucking thing is a chemical, you donkey. Like, come on now. Like, oh my goodness. So, yeah. Food shaming there.
And I think the issue is just that they like laser in on one tiny piece of like this massive puzzle of health. And it's like, if that focus was the issue, like, you know what I mean? Like, it's just like, it's a red herring for everything. It's like, let's just blame like the chemicals in our food versus like really looking at the big picture and what is really contributing to people's, health ultimately.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it is totally. It's a red herring. Yeah. And then actually someone said to me that this was really difficult and I mentioned it to you, is that this food addict expert brought out pictures of a brain and saying like, this is what a brain looks like on sugar. And she said, quote, "You're always chasing that high like a drug addict," end quote. And that if you eat too much sugar, you're going to have an abnormal brain. Then she shows a brain which of someone who has used cocaine and sugar next to each other. And she said that this eating sugar is a brain condition. And so because she brought out images of brains, that's so convincing, right? So convincing. Well, oh my God, look, it's clear as day. Someone has used cocaine and the dopamine is lighting up just the way it does when someone has eaten sugar. But what they don't show is another slide which shows the brain when you are hugging a kitten, the brain when you see someone that you love, the brain when you have a really enjoyable shit. Because guess what? It lights up too. It's our pleasure. It's, what's causing us pleasure. It lights up. And so they don't show all the other stuff. They just show the cocaine to stigmatize people who might have addiction issues and to stigmatize people who eat sugar, which is, we need it to live. It's just,
And like, how I feel about this. And, we both know how that whole sugar addiction thing has been dismantled and broken down and is, not really a thing. But what has your experience been with clients and personally around this? Because I can speak to that too.
Oh my goodness, that is such a good question, because telling someone that sugar addiction doesn't exist or food addiction doesn't exist, it doesn't matter, because your experience, my experience, your as in people in the world experience is that they are addicted. And I was 100% sure that I was addicted to food because I could not stop thinking about it. It's all I ever wanted. And I was really hyper-focused on it. But why might that be, Summer?
Well, could it be that, were you restricting things, or did you feel like those foods were bad or forbidden?
Ding, 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 ding. Exactly. Yeah. That's exactly what was going on.
I know.
You see that with clients, don't you, a lot?
Yeah. And myself. I mean, over and over and over and over and over. Like, I used to be the type of person that was like eating cake from the pan, standing in my fridge. Like, why can't I stop? Like, I have no control. Like, I'm addicted to this. And then when I started feeding myself like a grown ass woman, I just don't like, sometimes I forget about food, like in the fridge. Cake is just cake. Like, I'll have some if I want it. And a lot of the time I'm just like, I don't feel like it because I am fed and I know that I can have it anytime I want. And I don't believe it's bad. And I've done enough like unlearning on like all this bullshit that we're supposed to look at food as if it's toxic and forbidden. And it's just neutral. Like, food is just food. There's no morally, superior foods. It's really more about, having a healthy relationship with it. And all of this stuff is driven by, our culture's obsession with, being thinner and like watching your weight, so to speak. And I've never not seen this. I've never had a client come to me and still be like, I can't stop eating sugar. Every time it's like, once the foods become, once the food is no longer off limits, I think is what I'm trying to say, then they get to a point where it's just not a big deal and they will forget about it or have one bite of it or eat a lot of it because they want it and enjoy it and maybe get a tummy ache sometimes. But like, that's the extent of it.
Yeah, exactly. And the big way that we can know that it's not an addiction is that when you increase your exposure to an actual addictive substance, your symptoms increase. Whereas with food or sugar, if you increase your exposure, the symptoms decrease. And so what we need to be doing is the opposite, is allowing ourselves the sugar, the food, whatever it is that we are feeling like we are addicted to. And then lo and behold, turns out we weren't addicted. We were just obsessed because we denied ourselves so much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So a bunch of people called out, JVN just speaking to the problematic nature of the episode, especially as it like really didn't fit it with the rest of the sort of series that you're talking about. Right. And they responded, didn't they?
Yeah. And just to kind of wrap up on what happened at the end of the episode is the solution to this addiction that he has is to eat only organic cookies, which has sugar in the form of... Yep.
What's the difference?
Yeah, because the sugar is in the form of a syrup and not white sugar, which apparently is, going to...
Your body doesn't know the difference.
And also these cookies are good because they don't have anything in there that you can't pronounce. So that's going to help with the sugar addiction, apparently. And this says nothing about, this is so fucked. Like that's the thing to do is eat an organic cookie, which of course are going to be like $75 per cookie. So what about if you can't afford to eat organic cookies? So, and you have a quote unquote food addiction. Well, sorry, you're fucked, And then the episode ends with JVN being at the fridge, opening it, closing it, debating about having something to eat or not. And then a cartoon mouse saying, "Are you thirsty, perhaps, instead of being hungry?" And then the resolution is that JVN decides to have half an Oreo cookie and gives the other half to the mouse. And I thought that was pretty funny because half an Oreo cookie, when really, they wanted to eat something more, like that is fit for a mouse, not a human being busy doing life, like you need to eat some more. Yeah. So, JVN actually responded to Moxie Mind, because Moxie Mind made a post saying, this is fatphobia. And JVN said, "Hi, loves. I'm sorry. As someone who is in recovery, I'm learning as I go. It's part of why I explored this in this series. I'm never done with learning on a subject and am always going to want to do more. As we discussed in the episode, we have to take the shame and stigma out of this conversation and emphasize it's not the individual's fault, but an industry-wide system that needs so much healing." So basically he's saying it's not your fault that you might be a sugar addict, it's the system. There are so many ways to heal and learn. I'm not perfect and I'm learning and sharing as I go. I could always do better, but as they say, people are doing the best they can with what they know. I've been struggling with binge eating my entire life and I want to have a conversation about it, and I'm certainly not done talking about it. I'm excited to keep learning and growing around this topic. Heart, love and light. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, at least they responded, and I mean, people will hear what they want to hear when they're ready. And I don't think that you can necessarily force that on people, but it's just unfortunate that a lot of other people probably were impacted as a result of that episode, because it just further reinforces this belief that, there's something wrong with them and they just need like a different meal plan to fix the fact that they're just fucking starving mentally and physically,
Yeah. And a lot of people weren't happy with that response. And, because, JVN's not saying, "I fucked up. You're absolutely right. I'm going to learn from fat non-binary people." It sounds like they still believe that they are a food addict or,
how do you, I think they're going to have their own awakening at whatever time is right for them. I don't think you can exactly. You and I both know you can't convince someone if they don't want to hear it. And I think it's a hard thing. It's a hard thing to convince when there's probably some level of, fat phobia inside about like, I can't, like, this must be an issue, right? Because the notion of just being able to eat what I want is probably too scary because of the fat phobic beliefs.
Yeah. So I sent JVN a DM saying, oh, hey, if you want me to be like, a fat person on your show, then let me know. So I'm shooting my shot. Nothing probably will happen, obviously, because they probably don't check their DMs. But, you never know.
You never know. They responded to the comments, so you just never know. But
actually, you know what, Summer? Other people have made posts about it, and JVN has blocked everyone that's made posts about it. So they only commented on that one, and then the conversation now is shut down.
Oh, well, they got to manage their mental health. I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe they feel bad. I don't know.
Who knows, right?
Trying to have empathy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's that. I mean, we've taken up half an hour talking about that mess of a show. Longer than what the show was.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
And what did you find around this idea of toxic food, Summer?
Well, I found a Newsweek cover that said toxic food that came out, I think around Christmas or beginning of January, obviously, like kind of coinciding with the whole diet season. And, when you mentioned this episode to me, I was like, it's exactly what was in this article, like essentially just reinforcing all the different things that you've said. And, like when I saw it and I read it, I was like, Jesus Christ, like, is it like 1996 called? They want their magazine covers back. Like, why are we still talking about the same thing that clearly is not really like the issue? You know what I mean? Like, again, it's like, it's the red herring, right? And so the article really talks about how, ultra processed foods, that's the sort of, label that they've given them, are things that, big food, the system, which I used to work for. I don't remember ever being in a meeting room where people were scheming about like, we got to get people to eat more. Like, you know what I mean? So
you clearly did some. I don't lie. You were there being like,
you're like, yeah, like capitalism rampant. Of course they care about profits. Of course it's all about the shareholders. Of course it's all about sales. But I think this idea that there's like these evil like masters behind it trying to, I'm a little skeptical of the whole thing.
Yeah, because it's easy. If you think they're trying to kill people, well, it's not a good idea to kill people, because then who's going to eat your food,
Yeah, it's an easy scapegoat, because I think again, like the problem is much bigger than just this one little piece of the puzzle. And I'm not saying that like, the food industry is all great, like there's absolutely issues with the food industry, but they echo basically the same things that you said, that, that these ultra processed foods are designed to directly target the vulnerabilities of the human brain, and that they deliver like a quick signal to the brain's reward system. So many people find them as addictive as opioids or nicotine. But then they go on to just call them possibly addictive later on. Oh. So I was like, pick a lane, like, yeah. I think, and really just saying, that this is the problem. People can't stop eating them. And the conclusion is that, whatever these food chemists are doing to food is making people fatter. And obviously they're talking about that in like a very negative sense, because the article opens up with, please don't read this article. Like it's very heavy on the O word. It's very heavy on the, it's your individual problem that you've gained weight and you're unhealthy. And like, there's so much bullshit in it that it's, like I said, it's like 1996 called, it's like so outdated in so many different ways. And a couple of things I just wanted to pull out was, they mention that between 1980 and 2000, that's when like obesity began to rocket upwards. Well, do you know what happened in that period of time?
No, tell me what happened in that period of time, Summer.
They altered the BMI to lower it to say, okay, now people over this amount are considered, O and O. And therefore, maybe that's why. Do you think maybe that's why it skyrocketed?
I mean, it sounds very convenient, doesn't it? That millions of people overnight suddenly became too fat. Yeah, and the skyrocketing a number of people when it's just a category has been changed. And arbitrarily, like the fact that the BMI is, 20, 25, because it was easy numbers to remember. There's no reason. It's just because it was an easy number to remember. It's the number 5. So, science.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And also like who benefited from that change? Pharmaceutical companies peddling weight loss drugs and
diet companies.
Yeah, exactly. And so, the article's quite lengthy and it really covers a lot of the same stuff that was unfortunately covered in that episode that you watched. And I think that like ultimately it's just, there seems to be this issue of like people eating more, but it's like they never factor in the influence of diet culture. They never take into account like any of the other variables that might drive that, like whether or not someone has a living wage, like what other social detriment, I can never say this word properly. Detrimentals, yes, of health. Like what are, what I mean? Like what are these other factors that ultimately have like a greater influence on someone's health? Like what role is that playing in these increases in diseases? You know what I mean?
Yeah. And the idea that, really what we need to be looking at is shame, the amount of shame that people are experiencing and the amount of oppression that they're experiencing. But it's so much easier to say, just eat an organic cookie than it is to say, maybe there's a disparity between how Black people experience healthcare between other populations. Because it's so easy to blame the individual and be like, eat an organic cookie, when what the fuck is that going to do? Yeah.
That's elitist health, through and through. That's like the goop world, right?
It's so goopy. Oh my God.
Yeah. Are we just making that a verb now? Like,
yeah. It's so fucking.
Or would that be considered a verb or a noun or an adverb?
Who the fuck?
Adjective, yeah, maybe an adjective.
Yeah, it's a word. It's a word now. That's goopy. And you know what? The thing is though, when like with this episode, you see those slides of the brain, and then you're like, oh my God, it must be real. And you see this article that's so long, that's so chock-a-block full of linking to this study, linking to this other thing, and la 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 la. Or we all know that it becomes overwhelming, and then you start to think, hang on, is it true? And then you start to really kind of feel that shame and your health is affected. And the thing is, you and I, we're able to dissect this and say, let's look at this study and how many people did they study? And what other factors were going on? And let's look at this evidence and see, actually, it's a load of bullshit. But other people aren't because, for many different reasons, because this is our job, right? And so to say, if you are seeing this type of stuff and feel like, oh my God, but it might be true, that's a normal reaction to have. And if you have the capacity just to look a little bit into it or just reach out to someone who does it as a job to, look at this stuff, and to get that reassurance of you're probably not going to die within 3.5 seconds if you eat a Twinkie,
Yeah, well, and I think like a lot of the numbers that they throw out there, like you said, like I know at the beginning they open the article saying, I can't remember what percentage they say, but of Americans are either diabetic or pre-diabetic. Well, we talked about in one of the other episodes how like the pre-diabetic is so large, but that doesn't, such a tiny percentage of those people actually end up getting diabetes. And I think like one of the things that also makes me really furious is that like they're putting the onus, I mean, they do put the onus back on, like the food industry to try to do something. Like they suggest doing what they've done with tobacco, which is to like put a warning label on it or change the way that these foods are marketed. But I'm like, that's not going to resolve any of the issues. Like if people can't afford, don't have time for, like fresh, like fruits and vegetables, so to speak. Like convenience foods keep people fed. You know what I mean? Like, and I just think that there's like a huge piece of this conversation that gets missed, and people are allowed to eat whatever the fuck they want. Also, like,
yeah.
let people have that autonomy.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. And then, it's a lot of it is like a lot of well-meaning white people who are like, oh my God, these poor people, they've only got access to, a Quickie Mart or whatever. Is that a thing? Or is that just in the symptoms? Anyway, they don't have access to fruits and vegetables. And so what we're going to do is we're going to save them. We're going to go into their community and we're going to give them a farmer's market. And it's just so, it's so white. It's just so white people, right? Going in there into communities and deciding what we're going to do to fix their problem of disparities in health outcomes is to give them some farmers markets, fruits and vegetables. It's just like, oh my goodness, how patronizing. How about paying people? How about not being racist? How about
access to healthcare?
Like that stuff. No, because we've got a farmers market on Saturday, so we're doing good, so we can feel good about ourselves. Yes.
110%. Yeah. I mean, like, and I don't think like all things are bad or all things are good. Like, I think there's, probably nuance within any of these. Like, yeah, farmers markets, great idea. And like, let's not ignore the bigger problems that are really playing a part here. And, specifically as it relates to living wage and access to healthcare and things like that.
Or, just giving money to communities so that they decide what is best for them versus,
yeah. Mm-hmm. So true.
White British people like me deciding, we know what's best for that community because we don't. So
yes. Oh my gosh, that's so true, right? Yeah.
So to wrap up, we asked our audience about what do they think about the idea that you can be addicted to sugar, and what do they think of when they hear the phrase processed food? So I had a few people thinking processed food meant bad things.
Yeah, actually, I got quite a few of those responses. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But then I had a lot of people saying, this one comment was, I hate it. Unless you are directly sucking a cow's tit, all food is processed. Yeah. And then someone said, oh, you need to talk about the JVN episode. I said, I am. And in regards to the sugar addiction, it's not evidence-based and it's a wellness culture lie. Yeah.
Yeah. I got some people saying they feel that way and it is real. And so it was, I got kind of across the spectrum. So it wasn't all one or all the other. There's, and that's coming from like, our audiences where we're really pretty clear on like our messaging, but I think that there's still a lot of fear and misinformation, and hopefully this episode helps people to want to learn more, to want to, debunk some of this stuff, to be able to look at the big picture.
You know who I love that I don't know if you already follow them, Food Science Babe.
I don't follow them, but I know I've heard of their page. Yeah. They're good.
She's still got a little bit of diet stuff to work out. She's not pro diet or anything, but there's a little bit of, but what she does is she debunks all of the, don't eat gluten, don't eat this, So it's really interesting because she's a food scientist.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. I'll have to check that out. I'm trying to limit how many people I follow because it just feels overwhelming to me.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I'm like, there's probably a million good pages that I just can't physically.
I know.
My brain can't take it.
Yeah.
Even though the algorithm probably only shows me the same 4 people over and over. But.
Right. Totally. So, Summer, where can people find you?
Yeah. So people can find me at thebodyimagecoach.com. That'll take you to my website. And you can find me all over social media as Summer Inanen. And my podcast is Eat the Rules. Where can people find you, Vinny?
They can find me everywhere under Fierce Fatty. My podcast is called Fierce Fatty, website Fierce Fatty, social media Fierce Fatty. And go to my website to get some free stuff if you want. I'm not the boss of you. Do what you want.
Oh yeah, same. All right. Well, thanks to everyone for being here today. Hope you enjoyed this rich discussion between two highly intelligent individuals who are also extremely good looking.
Right? Oh my God. Just looking at my reflection, it turns me on. It's so good. Yeah. All right. See you next time, Summer.
Rock on.
All right. Thank you so much for being here today. You can find this episode and all the links and resources mentioned at summerinnan.com/225. Don't forget, you can now access all the episodes of the podcast if you want. Have at her, just wherever you listen to podcasts. Thank you so much for listening today. I'll be back again next week with another episode. Rock on. I'm Summer Innanen, and I want to thank you for listening today. You can follow me on Instagram and Facebook at Summer Innanen. And if you haven't yet, go to Apple Podcasts, search Eat the Rules, and subscribe, rate, and review this show. I would be so grateful. Until next time, rock on.